Today I'm at in Albuquerque. I am at the home of some very good friends, Kyle Meyer and Kelly, his partner, and they have a spectacular place here in Albuquerque and been gracious enough to invite me down. So yesterday I traveled down to Albuquerque. It was the big test flight for my new transmission, and I was very pleased in its performance. I was cruising along and at much lower RPMs than I'm used to, and realized I was doing 90 miles an hour. And well, that's as fast as the speedometer will read. I don't know, I could have been going more. But until we hit the winds, and then the winds are something like you don't see out east. It's like the Dust Bowl. All of a sudden, all this dust kicks up, and these winds just want to blow you right off the road. So it was everything that I could do to hold on to the steering wheel, hold on to the truck, and back it down to about a modest 55 miles an hour. So I pulled into Old Town Albuquerque, and it's not like anything else in this town. Everything else is very modern, busy, but Old Town certainly has that historic feel, very similar to Santa Fe, but on a much more modest. It's like a mini version of Santa Fe. It's that same town square. It's got the Catholic Church, which always seems to be to the north side. For some reason, they put them like that. And one of the first things I noticed, being from Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, is 2 Civil War cannons there. So I went over there and investigated that, and here were these 2 brass tubes of what I knew were mountain howitzers. They were a smaller Civil War cannon. They were much more portable. They were meant to be disassembled, put on pack mules, and carried over mountainous terrain. And then there was a great plaque actually describing exactly why they were there. The Battle of Glorieta Pass, which some have called the Gettysburg of the West, was fought not far from here. And in the Confederate retreat from that battle, as they came through Albuquerque, for some reason the Confederate commander deemed it necessary to disassemble these guns and hide them, because I believe they thought they were going to be overtaken by the Union forces, and something as valuable as a cannon, you didn't want to fall into enemy hands. So they dug big trenches and buried these 8 cannon there near the town square. And it wasn't until 27 years later where that Confederate commander actually came back to town and said, "Hey guys, we buried these back here during, retreat from that battle." The town people knew nothing about it. I don't know how you keep burying cannons quiet, but they did somehow. And 27 years later, in a pepper patch, they dug these cannons up. Now, 2 of them are actually on display in the museum down there, and what they have is the replica of those 2 sitting there in the square. So, yeah, that was a really interesting side story. What's interesting, I think, about Albuquerque is the history here. Is you've got settlers that have dated back to the 1600s, and some of these first structures are, from the late 16, early 1700s, and they're still standing. They're still being used today. You've got this Civil War history of the 1860s, and I think what's most interesting is that the creation of a new a new history here of something that's really groundbreaking, and that's Netflix has come in and infiltrated this town, built huge sound stages, and now Sony and a number of other studios have followed suit. So you've got this whole renaissance of settlers, if you will, coming here to Albuquerque because they see, I think they see fortune here, just like the early settlers did back in the 1600s. So it's a very unique mix here. It's a very young demographic, I think, and a ton of creatives. There's filmmakers, there's artists, there's musicians, there's, again, in the food and wine industry and that sort of stuff. So, I mean, there's this big melting pot of creative people coming together in Albuquerque. And it's a different vibe than Santa Fe. So another one of those crazy spur of the moment kind of things that happen with me. I'm staying here at the home of my friends Kyle and Kelly, and a knock at the door early this morning. I'm having a cup of coffee, and it's plumbers who are coming in and redoing the piping and some other things for hot water heaters, that kind of stuff. So I let them in, and they're doing their thing, and I'm doing my thing, and I'm putting out my morning journal stuff, and I go out to the truck for some reason. I come back in, and I hear this torch going, and I happen to peek around the corner, and here's the one gentleman, Stephen, I believe his name is, sweating in joints on a copper pipe. And he had this real high temperature MAP gas torch, and he looked like he'd done this a lot of times. And I watched and watched and watched. And actually, I was going to borrow a tape measure from him for something else. But I saw him doing that, and I said, you know what? There's my radiator guy. I've got this old brass radiator on this 34 truck, and it's had a little pinhole in it that's been weeping out antifreeze for months now, especially now that it's getting warm, and I'm building more pressure in there. And I've tried commercial epoxy things, JB Weld, and it never, I said, you need just an old school radiator guy that knows how to sweat in a joint and solder, that kind of thing. So I asked him if he'd come out, interrupted what he was doing. So it's like, Kyle's hot water can wait. This radiator is more important right now. And he said, sure, I'd love to do it. And he knew all about it. The guy was an expert. I couldn't have searched New Mexico and found a guy that knew more about how to sweat in that joint on that brass radiator. And the guys that's actually doing the work 10 feet away from where I was typing this morning. So another one of those just weird coincidences, or the universe revealing itself to me, where the right person comes along at the right time, and you've got to be just bold enough to ask and say, hey, could you take a look at this for me? And he slipped him $20. I said, here, have a pizza and a couple beers, and thank you. And so it looks great. So we'll find out. We started it up. I didn't see any leaks at all. I think he solved my problem. So, yeah, I can't... Again, another one of those crazy divine interventions that just happened on a road less traveled.